What's up everybody? Welcome back to TeeDogCustoms and to another video. Right off the bat, I'm going to apologize for the wind noise, if there is any. But we have this beautiful backdrop here and some trains, just beautiful scenery here. And I figured I'd do a video on the YJ. And kind of go into some more detail of the entire build, what we have going on. I've had some requests about suspension, what exactly is up with it. Let's start with the front axle setup. Both axles are actually out of a 99 F250. On the front here, we have the stock leaf springs out of the F250. So the front leaf springs, I kept everything the same. The leaf spring perches, because I didn't want to cut into this or weld anything onto that. It seemed easier to just let the front suspension be where it was at and work around that. So that's what I did. These are stock placement in the F250. I did have to, make these mounts here and, kind of box it in, make it nice and sturdy. But that's kind of the front situation. I had to weld these shock mounts for the actual shocks, which turned out really good. Then on the back here, these springs are actually out of a Dodge 2500, which is the actual truck that the diesel came out of. So there were some like helper spring packs that I took out, so we didn't need those. And so that's kind of the deal, is the leaf springs out of a 2500 Dodge. I did have to replace the springs on the axles. So literally what I did was I just cut the welds that go to this, if you see that. I had to cut those off, relocate them, and then also twist the axle because I had to give it a little change in pinion angle with the new setup. So that was pretty easy though, but you just had to cut that and relocate them. I have them relocated to the back. Now, something that I learned with this whole setup is that a lot of people use Jeep Cherokee springs to do the swap. So the advantage of that is it retains the original mount location on the frame. So instead of having this outside, it's in line with the frame back here. That is, I didn't know that when I did the swap. It was my bad. I should have researched a little better. But looking back, I'm glad I went this route, because I now have 1-ton suspension underneath it, and I'm not ever having to worry about overtaxing the suspension, especially with the heavier Cummins 6BT up front. It's a very heavy engine, and I'm glad I stuck with 1 tons up front. I think it's going to handle better, just as far as handling the weight. It's already way better than the stock springs I had on there, so I'm very happy with it. We're looking at some Vision D window steelies that I powder coated Jamaican teal. So the whole theme of this Jeep, and actually, to be honest, my truck as well, is I just am in love with Jamaican teal powder coat. You know, sue me, it's just something I really enjoy and I like. So the wrap is Vivid, and I have videos on the wrap, but the wrap is actually Vivid's wrap, and it's in chalk gray is the actual color, is what it's called. A lot of people, when they see it in person, they say, oh, it's white and teal, I love that. But the truth of the matter is that it's not white. It is chalk gray and Jamaican teal. The pattern I use for this, if you look real close, the sun is unfortunately covered up, but if you look at this in the sunlight, it's very sparkly. I got a few comments on YouTube and saying, you know, oh, that's a girl's color Jeep, and that very well may be, but the truth is that I actually like it a ton. Very stoked with how it turned out, even if it may be a girl-ish color. I don't see it that way, but you know, you're welcome to your own opinions. But the teal is start out with alien silver, and then we go with the Jamaican teal, and then we top it off with the baby rock star sparkle, which gives it the clear coat and also just gives it that extra little bit of sparkle. I also get the question a ton, what would you do different if you could start over the whole build and do it again? The real answer to that is there's not much that I would do different. I feel like I took my time. I did adequate research on what I wanted to do. Let me start off really on that note about there is not really a playbook to go by for a 6BT Cummins swapped YJ Jeep. You see them a lot of times in the newer like 4-door Jeeps. I've seen more in that. So really, I've only really seen one other YJ with a 6BT Cummins swap, and that's the 12 valve, not even the 24 valve. So I mean, the 12 and 24 valve are very similar in how they would bolt in, so there's not much difference as that goes, but there's no real playbook to go by to do something like this. It's just kind of you build it how you want to. So the question, what would I change? If there's one thing I'm going to do to this at some point, it would be to go with a 4-link suspension all the way. So instead of having the leaf springs, you know, just jump right into a 4-link setup. That is probably the only difference I would do, except for that, you know, I have way too many other responsibilities financially that are more important than this. And if I went 4-link, excuse the plane, but if I went 4-link, it would have taken probably like 3 or 4 times the amount of money to do it. So being that, you know, when I got the axle, I already had all the leaf springs. My cousin had given me those leaf springs on the rear a long time ago, and so it really financially only made sense to do it this way first. And I tell people all the time, like, this is revision 1. So we're not done with this. I'm gonna ride it like this for a while until financially, it's like it makes sense. Okay, you've got the money, you've got the time, like let's set aside a couple weekends and knock this out. I have yet to take it off-road and see how it does four-wheeling with the 1-ton axles. We are headed to Jeep Jam in Panama City Beach, Florida, the 11th of May, so that's coming up as well. We're gonna video that. If we come over to the back end of the Jeep, you'll notice I've got round tail lights on the back here. I have a video specifically on cutting out these round tail lights, but the truth of the matter is I really just like the way they look. I don't really have any, there's no advantage to it. It's just pure aesthetics. I think it looks better, and I get more compliments on this than I did with just the stock square taillights. So that's kind of the situation with that. I feel like another big topic, if you're thinking about doing a, oh, there's the sun, feels so nice. I think another big topic, if you're thinking about doing a 1-ton axle swap in the rear and you are planning on stretching it by any means, you are going to have to do something with the fuel tank. Most people relocate the rear fuel tank to the back, like where the actual rear seat is. I feel like this is probably the biggest issue that I ran into with the swap, is I had to figure out how to move my fuel tank up about 3 to 4 inches to give me enough room for the differential to be able to go up and down without hitting the bottom of the fuel tank. The metal that cases the fuel tank, which actually holds the fuel tank up, I had to take about 4 inches out of that and then weld it back together, and then the straps that go over and also hold the tank to that metal piece, I had to shorten those up and weld my own bolts to it. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort to get it like perfect how I wanted it. I know the easiest solution to the rear fuel tank is to put a fuel cell in the back where the seat is. Unfortunately for me, this is a family ride. It's not like my wheel and buggy that me and one other passenger may go. Me, my wife, and my daughter go out in this almost every week. So it was not possible or realistic to relocate the fuel tank to the back of the Jeep. And that's just pretty much simple as it is. I had to figure out a way to make it work, and we did. And you know, I'm happy. Something that is very important to keep in mind too, you will not be able to find 3 or 4 inches to move the fuel tank up unless you have a 3-inch body lift or more. So that's the only reason why I could get this thing to work, is because I already had a 3-inch lift on the Jeep, which allowed me to move the tank up, because otherwise you're going to run into the bottom of the tub in the back. So you will definitely have to have some kind of body lift to be able to get the tank tucked up there enough. I feel like that's a very important piece of information, because if you go into this expecting like, oh yeah, you know, I don't have a body lift and I'll just throw the tank up there higher. Now they may sell skinnier tanks, I don't know. That's something I didn't even research because I knew this would work. I had already kind of poked my head up under there and kind of mapped out what I was gonna do before I did the whole swap. I think what we'll do now is we'll go on and show you the engine and just kind of cover the engine bay. We're under the hood now. You can see we've got a 24 valve with a P pump. Show you guys. I feel like you all are gonna want to see this, but we've got the 24 valve, the P pump, the turbo, which I flipped the manifold around so the turbo sits up top instead of down below like it would normally. Kind of a cheat code. So when it comes to getting your turbo to sit up high like this, a kind of a cheat code to get your turbo up is all you do is you flip the manifold around and it points your turbo up instead of pointing the turbo down. So that's a kind of like a cheat code to get a more aggressive look that looks really cool and kind of pops the turbo up, especially if you've got like powder coated housings. It looks really cool. Now the plans for the engine, eventually I'm gonna go compound, probably with like a stock HX35, which that is, and then maybe like a S400, not something like too big, but just something to give it some compounds. So the second turbo will sit somewhere probably over in this vicinity right here, and it'll just look killer and have plenty of power. It already has, way too much power than I'm currently using, but it's still cool. I feel like that covers the engine. Maybe I'll make another video at some point that covers everything with the engine bay and all that, but for right now, I feel like in this video, for what the purpose is, it's not necessary to cover all that at this point. So a hot topic that comes up all the time on Instagram, but mainly again YouTube, on like the shorts I'll do, is that someone will say, hey buddy, cool Jeep, but why do you have $100 shocks on your $20,000 Jeep, or whatever number they throw out? And it's just part of the process, guys. Eventually I will, I've got rough country shocks on it. Yes, they were $100 for 4 shocks. If you don't know the math on that, that is $25 per shock. Very, very cheap, and affordable, to be honest. Now, they are okay. They are not good or great, but for the price, they got me through. I needed shocks for this before I did the axle swap. Actually, I needed shocks for this, and the only way that I was going to be able to afford to do the axle swap plus get shocks was to get a very affordable shock setup, knowing full well that one day down the road I am going to get a set of Kings or a set of Bilsteins, but you're talking a lot of dough for a set of Kings or Bilsteins. So that's not in the budget right now. That's as simple as it is. I don't personally have tons and tons of money tied up in this, but for someone like an outsider looking in, they're like, oh my goodness, you've got probably X amount into this. And the truth of the matter is, I just don't. The engine was pretty much given to me. There's a few things I had to buy, the P pump, which was, a pricey thing, but the trans and transfer case I bought that was probably the most expensive piece that I bought to the whole Jeep, was the trans and transfer case. But yeah, the axles, 500 bucks from my neighbor for the axles. Very reasonable for Dana 60 1-tons, you know. So when people look at this from the outside, yes, they always say, you've got so much money tied up into this, why didn't you spend that money on suspension, for example? And the truth of the matter is that I don't have that much money tied up in this, and the shocks alone for a nice set are probably close to $4 grand if you get a nice set. That's the answer to that. It will come, but it probably won't come with the leaf springs. It probably will come when I do the 4-link and all that. Let's pop over here to the rear and kind of show what I cut out. If we look, another train horn. If we look at the radius though here, you can kind of see where the, you know, this was a perfectly round radius, okay? So you can kind of see what I have cut out. Was this whole corner. Now, I had some questions of people asking, hey, does what you cut out cut into your rear tub? The answer is no, it doesn't. I cut it in such a way where there is a support bracket back here, and I made sure that I cut it to where I still kept that support bracket. So nothing from the tub is compromised. It was just one quick, easy cut. Now, if you are considering 1-ton axle swap, here is some things that you might want to consider. Now, if you are keeping a low horsepower engine, first of all, you're probably going to have trouble turning the wheels if you put a set of 38s, 37s, or even 40s, like definitely 40s. You'd have some issues as far as that goes. So what you may want to consider, which this is something that I didn't really consider, but with the amount of torque that the Cummins has, I was having really bad issues with axle wrap. And what axle wrap is when your drive shaft spins and it wants to torque your axle up because of the, I guess it would be like centrifugal force, kind of like pushing it up, and then you know, it wants to just bow your whole setup kind of upwards, and then what happens is your pinion angle and your drive shaft get out of whack, and then it gets really bumpy and starts vibrating really bad. With how short of a drive shaft I actually have in this, it was a big issue under like wide open throttle and certain gears. It would get really bad and just kind of really romp down and change the angle of the pinion. So what I had to do is I added traction bars, and I'll kind of give you a close-up. So I added these traction bars right here on either side, just to keep the axle planted from, you know, not letting it wrap. Now the Jeep can still drop down, and typically when you're, you know, under throttle or hitting it, the Jeep is going to want to squat down a little bit, kind of load up the suspension. Now this helps with that for sure, but it still does it. It's just a lot of torque out of this engine. So but this helped it to where it's not bouncing up and down or vibrating violently, because before it was vibrating pretty bad to where like I would let out of the gas because it was just vibrating so much. And I think, you know, with that much vibration, it's not good for the drive line, so it's not good for the transfer case, it's not good for the drive shaft and those joints, U-joints, but even more so, it's not good for the transmission, and that can also kind of translate into the engine, believe it or not, and cause some issues with maybe tolerances there. That much kind of like driveline vibration over time can cause some real issues that way. So keep that in mind. If it's vibrating violently and you don't address it, you will potentially, you know, you could cause some tolerances even all the way up in your engine, you know, to not be within spec and cause some premature, you know, maybe even some premature catastrophe like a bearing or something like that to kind of let loose. So just keep that in mind. Traction bars is a great way. These are actually tractor 3-point hitch off the back, like for your 3-point hitch. That's what these are, $20 a pop, instead of, you know, $40 for one Heim joint. You know, so very cost effective that way. Now if those were actually like a 4-link setup, I would not trust that kind of joint to actually support the Jeep. So just keep that in mind. We still have the leaf springs. Those are just to keep from axle wrap, so it's not like a 4-link setup at all. So don't worry, you know, about these being strong enough to actually hold the axle into place. Their only purpose is to keep axle wrap from happening, and I feel like we've beat that to the maximum. So we're gonna move on. So at this point you might be saying, Tanner, then where is this Jeep going? If you've done everything you want to do with it, what's next in store and what can we expect from the YouTube channel kind of moving forward? Well, there's still stuff I'm going to do to this. So let's come up here and I'll show you guys what potentially could take place. So I have a little bit of room between the radiator fan and the actual engine. So there's probably about this much space. So what I could do is I could push the radiator back about 1.5 to 2 inches, and that would leave me with a lot of space up here to potentially run a intercooler. So that might be the route I go, and then I can actually cut these fins out a little bit more to even give me more room, and then just put a intercooler up here and then have the hoses kind of angled out and back going that way. That might be the route I go. You know, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think it would look really cool getting a big old, as big of an intercooler as I could up front here. And I don't know if it's possible, but I feel like I could make something work that way, and kind of just, if I could I would be ecstatic. I want to cover one other thing with you guys real quick. These are my new hats. The TDC stands for TeeDogCustoms, and man, let me tell you, these things, they're 7-panel. The camo pattern on the black with the green just looks killer. If you are interested in purchasing one, go ahead and you know, drop me a comment below and I'll be happy to send one out to you. So guys, I think that probably wraps up the video that I had today and wanted to do for you guys based on some requests that I had got from you. I felt like this video was very fitting to cover all the basis kind of what went down. Please feel free to drop a comment below if you have any additional questions or video requests on the build, exactly what I did, or if you want me to cover something more in detail. I am more than happy to do that for you guys. We are approaching 1,000 subscribers like very quickly. I think we're at like 923. I really appreciate everyone who has subscribed and has shared the videos or the channel, and you know, I just, from the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate it. And you can expect more content, more off-roading. Like I said, keep posted for Jeep Jam and Panama City Beach, because we're going to be heading there. And yeah, if you thought this video was helpful or cool or enjoyable in any way, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not. And as always, keep grinding. I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.